I was determined that we should get to the bottom of the matter and that the truth should be fully brought out no matter who was involved. At the same time, I was determined not to take precipitate action and to avoid, if at all possible, any action that would appear to reflect on innocent people. I wanted to be fair, but I knew that in the final analysis, the integrity of this office, public faith in the integrity of this office, would have to take priority over all personal considerations. Today, in one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency, I accepted the resignations of two of my closest associates in the White House, Bob Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, two of the finest public servants it has been my privilege to know. The counsel to the President, John Dean, has also resigned.
Story that you told the FBI you had directed a independent investigation of the Pentagon Papers and Ellsberg.
The problem here is that with a question like that, in fact, almost any of these questions now regarding any of these subjects, anything that I might say could affect the rights of other people.
Well, the text of your interview with the FBI is printed in the paper. You don't deny that,
any comment that I might make, I would want to be very sure didn't affect somebody else's rights. So I have decided that for the next week or 10 days, at least until this investigatory process is completed, that I'm going to try and follow the very faithful practice of not commenting on any matter of substance or schedule or plans or anything like that.
Or despite Watergate. American current political history.
Michael, what do you think this is a part in a conversation with the phone? I wanted to say that on behalf of all of us, we were very much lucky to have
when we get through.
Well, you think what?
Shirley. I don't believe it'll hurt in the slightest for the very simple reason that neither the president, obviously, or anybody in the White House, or anybody in authority in any of the committees working for the re-election of the president have any responsibility for it, and therefore there's no reason why it should be a matter of concern to the American public, and it certainly won't hurt the president's re-election efforts.
You understand, I'm not asking you now about the merits of the legal case. What I'm asking you about is the whole thing as perceived by the public. The fact that the Democratic headquarters were bugged by someone, apparently somehow with funds that siphoned off from the president's re-election finance committee. You don't think that's an issue?
No, Mr. Shore, I think, again, like Mr. Colson, that I'll have to correct you. As far as I know, or as that I've been able to read or learn, there's been no indication or no proof that any funds have been siphoned off of any of the committees in connection with the Watergate bugging.
Yesterday on Meet the Press, my wife said that the current administration was the most corrupt administration in recent history. I agree with that, with one modification. I would leave out the word recent. The corruption of government has come many times in our national experience. At other times in our recent past, it has centered on a seemingly minor episode, such as General Vaughan's deep freeze, Sherman Adams' Vicuna coat, or Vice Presidential candidate Nixon's 1952 $18,000 secret fund. But at no time have we witnessed corruption as wide or as deep as in Washington right now. Instead of a Vicuna coat buying a letter to a regulatory commission, we hear about a campaign contribution buying $1 billion antitrust suit settlement. Instead of an $18,000 secret fund, we hear about a $10 million secret fund. And we face not merely the shoddy corruption that permits powerful men to buy what they want from public officials, but the steady corruption of our own precious values as a country.
door of government has been slammed shut in the face of the average citizen, and instead of information on why decisions are made, he has handed the latest public relations gobbledygook. Executive privilege is now being used to shield a White House counsel from testifying not about his conversations with the president, but about his alleged involvement in the planning and cover-up of a criminal conspiracy. And the president has avowed that executive privilege will not be used as a shield to prevent embarrassing information from being made available to Congress, but the cloak of secrecy thrown around the Watergate affair, the ITT antitrust settlement, and the Russian wheat deal suggests the contrary. And the list of instances of executive withholding of information from Congress compiled for these hearings show the president's assertion that executive privilege was used on only 3 occasions to be a gross understatement.
Insofar as the current executive-legislative relationship takes on a sharper edge because of Watergate, it must be borne in mind that determination of alleged violation of the criminal laws passed by Congress is uniquely the province of the judiciary. For crime, there can be no haven, and the White House has stated that even the president's closest personal aides will respond to grand jury inquiry.
Mr. McCord, your lawyer said in court that you have been under considerable pressure. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think nothing more than the appearance on about 14 different occasions in the past 30 days before the grand jury or the Senate Watergate Committee.
Mr. McCord, how do you feel now that you've testified and all of the information that's coming out now to support everything that you've been saying so far?
Well, I tried to give the information as best I knew it, to the best of my recollection, and as truthfully as I knew how. I'm glad that what appears to be verification is coming out of that. It was as accurate as I knew it to be, as I could recall it.
Have you told everything you know?
I really can't comment any further on what I've said to the grand jury or the Senate Watergate Committee, and wouldn't until they finish all of their interviews.
Still feel your conscience
clear for a time of your saying one thing and later on telling us that you in fact had heard.
No, you go back and check the record of what I said, and you'll find that it's been absolutely consistent all the way through.
Now, that's just what we have done, is check the record, and we found out that you said one thing at one time.
May I disagree with you? That is not true at all. What I have said that I had no prior knowledge of and no involvement in the electronic bugging of the Watergate. That's what I've said all along, and it still is true.
But now you're saying that 3 different times it was discussed.
It was disapproved, so I had no prior knowledge of the activity, and I had no participation in it. And it seems to me that you gentlemen of the Fourth Estate, who are so good with all these words, ought to be able to get these things straight.
Mr. Mitchell, where did the money for the intelligence unit come from?
You'll have to ask somebody that handles money. We didn't in the committee for the re-election of the president. Say, that's
General,
pretty
we have
tough.
I can report today that there have been major developments in the case, concerning which it would be improper to be more specific now, except to say that real progress has been made in finding the truth. If any person in the executive branch or in the government is indicted by the grand jury, my policy will be to immediately suspend him. If he is convicted, he will, of course, be automatically discharged. I have expressed to the appropriate authorities my view that no individual holding in the past or at present a position of major importance in the administration should be given immunity from prosecution. The judicial process is moving ahead as it should, and I shall aid it in all appropriate ways and have so informed the appropriate authorities. As I have said before, and have said throughout this entire matter, all government employees, and especially White House staff employees, are expected fully to cooperate in this matter. I condemn any attempts to cover up in this case, no matter who is involved.
Is it then simply a case of waiting for the heads to roll, or is there actual more revelations to be made known, do you think?
I think it goes way beyond the question of heads rolling. I think we still don't know nearly everything that happened during the campaign in terms of political espionage and sabotage, not just wiretapping, but other acts. We still don't know how way over $1 million was spent that seems to have been appropriated for undercover activities of one sort or another.
Is this the area in which your inquiries are now moving, to finding out where all that money came from and how it was spent?
I think a good deal of our efforts are in that direction now.
Bob, could I ask you, when did you first, going back now to June the 17th last year, when did you first begin to suspect that this was a really big story and not simply a bit of burglary?
Well, I think the day after, when it was established that one of the 5 men arrested in the Democrats' headquarters was the campaign security chief for the President's Re-Election Committee. We worked, as soon as that became apparent, we worked on an assumption that this was a very big story, and the paper allowed us to work full-time on it, where I think other papers did not give reporters that option. So we were able to dig into it and establish an entire background on each of the characters, see who they led to, who they worked for, where they traveled, where they got their money.
Now, during the actual election campaign, were you then saying that the White House was involved? How soon did you begin to suspect that people right at the top were involved?
I would say it was just about a month before the election we wrote our big story saying that the Watergate bugging was just one act in a very elaborate campaign of political spying and sabotage, and that as many as 50 people were working on this, that it was directed and sponsored from the White House, that it was a basic re-election campaign strategy by the President's Committee. We named some of the people involved before the election. However, I think a lot of people just didn't believe it.
I think people always assume that American politics anyway have a certain amount of corruption and wheeler dealing under the table, shall we say, about them. Now, is this just a rather bad case of an endemic corruption?
Obviously, I think there's always been some chicanery in politics. There's always been some underhanded activity. But the point to realize, I think, in Watergate is that nothing, certainly in this century, in American politics, has ever occurred comparable to this, where an incumbent administration set out to manipulate the internal politics of the opposition party, where Senator Marlowe Cook of Kentucky has referred to it as an attempt to rig an election. I don't know if I would go quite that far. There's never really been anything on this scope and this intensity involving this kind of money. And most corruption dealing with public officials in the past has dealt with personal greed. This has nothing to do with personal greed. It has to do with power and institutions and the presidency itself.
Can I ask both of you, has it been a personal satisfaction to you to be handling the Watergate story?
I think obviously, in the sense that it has had some effect. I think that at the same time, like everyone else, we're a little dismayed at the rather tragic proportions of everything that has occurred in terms of what it's done to the presidency itself.
You don't feel too happy about perhaps bringing down the stock of this administration?
Well, I mean, our job is to report what we call the truth, and we can still look over our shoulders sometimes and say that the truth goes to astonishing proportions here, and it involves people that the circle around the president. And obviously, this does not do good things for this country. It does not do good things for this government. And we have no intention of trying to undermine it, but we feel an intense responsibility to write what has happened, and we have from the beginning, and will continue.
And a number of Haldeman's protégés, including such former and present White House figures as Dwight Chapin, Jeb Magruder, White House counsel John Dean, Nixon's...
Who then is to blame for what happened in this case? For specific criminal actions by specific individuals, those who committed those actions must, of course, bear the liability and pay the penalty. For the fact that alleged improper actions took place within the White House or within my campaign organization, the easiest course would be for me to blame those to whom I delegated the responsibility to run the campaign. But that would be a cowardly thing to do. I will not place the blame on subordinates, on people whose zeal exceeded their judgment, and who may have done wrong in a cause they deeply believe to be right. In any organization, the man at the top must bear the responsibility. That responsibility, therefore, belongs here, in this office. I accept it. And I pledge to you tonight from this office that I will do everything in my power to ensure that the guilty are brought to justice and that such abuses are purged from our political processes in the years to come, long after I have left this office.
I was very pleased with that. I was a very stern supporter of Senator McGovern during the campaign, and I felt very strongly that when Watergate broke, that the ramifications were being completely overlooked, and I still very deeply believe that President Nixon is involved.
These are the top men, and if we cannot trust them, who are we going to trust? So I think they better get off fast, because I don't think anybody with common sense would say they are good for the country. They are a disaster. Thank you.
No, I think that the Attorney General and the 3A should be jailed. After all, Nixon is not above the law, or his forces are not above the law. They're acting as though that, the United States is their personal property. And it is supposed to be the government for the people.
I think there should be a general clean out of the whole thing. I do really. I think it's a disgraceful exhibit, I'm sorry to tell you.
I think that's the only recourse the President had asked for resignation of these, if they were really involved. I mean, the clean house, it's the only way it could be done. It doesn't sound good, doesn't look good, but President Nixon came through finally what he should have done some time ago.
The whole thing emanates from Nixon until he's held accountable for it. The rest of them are just henchmen.
What do you think should be done?
I think that the President should be impeached.
We must maintain the integrity of the White House. And that integrity must be real, not transparent. There can be no whitewash at the White House.